Candice Walls, followed by Tim Burrell. Burrell.
Good evening. My name's Candice Walls. I have lived in this community for the past 20 years, although I did visit here when I was 16 with a man named Ray Nidage and his daughter Karen Fricklin now. And he told me how this valley would one day become just like a big Los Angeles, and it was hard for me to believe that. And at that time, I never thought I'd be living here, but I've been been very grateful that I've lived here now for the past 20 years. I moved here. I've raised my family here. I did have my daughter in another area, my second daughter. I chose to have her not here because of the fact that if anything were to happen to her, that I would be separated from her. The real reason why I came here, though, I was just thinking about that with the people speaking, is that I'm a breast cancer survivor. Prior to my getting ill, my mother lived in the valley, and I moved here to my house. She lived in the San Fernando Valley, and I had to drive her, to all of her treatments, raising my two children, and it was very stressful. I did lose my mom. She survived for 4 months after she was diagnosed, and I was happy that I was there for her. And a year later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The only thing I could think of is, where am I going to go and who's going to take me? I was really fortunate to be able to have my treatment here. I didn't know that at the time, that facility was there for me, and I was so grateful to not put my family and my friends through the stress of getting me to my treatment, because it took a year for me to go through all of my treatment. Since then, I have helped implement the Sheila Arvelis Breast Imaging Center, which I think is such an incredible place for a woman to go and get her mammogram. And if, God forbid, she is diagnosed with breast cancer, she won't be like me. She'll be able to find out where she can go, at least to get choices. Where I was told I had breast cancer and left the building and didn't even know where to go. But I found my way to the Henry Mayo Hospital and the centers there and the doctors. And obviously, I'm a 9-year survivor, so I'm really fortunate. And I love this community. I'm just hoping that our hospital, can have any services that people might need. I know my father came to visit me, and he had to have his appendix removed. I was extremely worried about him. He's in his 80s, but he did survive. But, I didn't know about the care there, for that department anyway. And I do feel that our community, each and every one of us deserves the best care. We need to be able to be in our community and go to the doctors that we need for whatever illness might come upon us, unfortunately for us. And it's just imperative that we all pass this and have the hospital be a go. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tim Burrell. I know I'm mispronouncing. I apologize, sir. Followed by Mark Paleo.
Good evening. My name is Tim Burrell. I'm the owner of Sunshine Child Care and Learning Centers and Legacy Christian Academy. I must admit that this is kind of like watching Jay Leno nodding off and getting woke up by a late-night phone call. I'm usually in bed by now, but it was such an important issue for me to be speaking about tonight. I couldn't pass it up. I represent over 1,250 families that are part of my organization. And 2 years ago, when I became a member of the foundation board, I heard from many of them, two concerns: the quality of the hospital and lack of beds. Roger Seaver has already been making great strides in improving the quality of care at Henry Mayo. And if you free him up from the controversy that's been going on for the last 4 years, I believe he can continue to improve the quality. In regards to beds, this master plan is a good one. It's sound, and it's been through 4 years of adjustments and massaging, and I believe it's ready to be approved tonight. Finally, we all know that Henry Mayo is our hospital. It will be a long time, maybe more than 10 years, before another hospital would be established or built in our community, and we can't wait that long. Chances are a lot of us will end up at Henry Mayo in the next several years, and I hope there'll be hospital beds for each one of us. I urge you to approve the master plan tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mark Paleo.
Good evening, Mayor Keller and City Council members. My name is Mark Paleo. I come here today as a concerned resident, father of 2 young daughters, and a husband. I also come here as a Henry Mayo employee. My family and I have lived in this valley for over 12 years. During that time, we've used the hospital-related services many times, including maternity, physical therapy, diagnostic imaging, and your typical emergency visits. We have always received great care. On a more recent visit to the ER, my oldest daughter was in an accident that ultimately required several stitches in her young face. You can imagine our concern that if it was not performed to perfection, my child could be scarred permanently. We were fortunate to have a well-qualified plastic surgeon available, and her scarring is very minimal today. Some of our friends and neighbors aren't so fortunate. They have had to travel outside this community for specialty services such as high-risk pregnancy, neonatal care, and cardiac care, to name a few. I want to see our medical campus grow and improve for not only the sake of my own family, but that of my friends and neighbors as well. My 10-year-old daughter, Madison, has taken an interest in the hospital's master plan. So much so that she wrote and presented a persuasive speech to her class earlier this year. Writing the speech was important to Madison, not only because her dad works at Henry Mayo, but because she wanted an opportunity to share accurate information about the hospital and its expansion plans with her friends and their parents who attended the school on speech day. She's often become frustrated by the negative comments made about the hospital by people who don't really know the reasons why patients might have to wait for services, have a bed in the hallway of the ER, or even travel outside of this valley for care. These same people make negative comments based on assumptions, not facts. Madison wanted to make sure that her audience was given accurate information about the need to expand the hospital so they could make the decision on fact and not hype. My wife and I were not comfortable for Madison to make her speech here for you tonight, but Madison did ask that I share with you, and I have copies of that available. I also work at Henry Mayo, having primarily taken the position to be close to home. Now, 7 years later, I really can't imagine working anywhere else. I'm currently the head of human resources. In that capacity, I'm responsible for recruitment and retention of highly specialized, qualified, competent staff. When I started, we employed approximately 800 staff. We have now grown to well over 1,200 employees, making us one of Santa Clarita's largest employers. I must note that our current average salary is about $30 an hour, which is well above the average of most of the employers in the Santa Clarita Valley. Many of our employees, if not most, work compressed work weeks, 3 to 4 days a week, 10, 12-hour shifts, and we're a 24/7 operation. This means the staff is not consistently contributing to traffic on McBean during peak traffic times. Please approve this master plan. It provides the infrastructure necessary for a healthy hospital, a healthy Santa Clarita, and healthy employment. Let's not forget that this is our only hospital in the Santa Clarita Valley and the only hospital with a plan for the future and a focus on our community. No one else can say that. My family and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the speakers we have in support. We have approximately 30 more to go. And I want to ask my council members, do they want to if we do take a break, can we hold it to 5 minutes, please? And I apologize, I know it's a late night, but just 5 minutes, and we'll be right back, okay?
I think we should have the language reviewed.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we'll find our seats, we'll resume our meeting, please.
The problem is for us girls that the bathroom on the bottom floor isn't very,
I know, I ran in there just to make sure.
yeah, just so you can get there.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have, like I said, about 30 speakers left, according to the cards anyway. Our first speaker will be Lynn Plavix, followed by Lynn Vogel, followed by Martha Willman. Lynn?
Lynn Plavix has stepped out to the restroom for a little while.
Well, I'll go with the next one and I'll
Can
call
you
her
go
back.
later? Thank you.
Lynn Vogel? And a reminder, when I call your name, if you can come forward, we'd appreciate it very much. Followed by Martha Willman.
Good evening, council members, mayor. Thank you for allowing us all to speak tonight and taking the time, and we realize it's been a long 3 years. I won't get emotional and tell my life story and how long I've lived here. I will say 4 years ago, I attended a meeting a neighborhood meeting that Mr. Seaver put on for all the neighbors regarding a hospital expansion. The neighbors were excited because that's our hospital. So we were interested to see what this hospital expansion was. I was jaw-slacked. I could not believe what I was looking at in this meeting. It was unbelievable. It was massive. But the worst part was I realized this was not a hospital. I was not looking at a hospital. I was looking at parking structures and medical office buildings. And I realized that Henry Mayo is a nonprofit hospital, and I didn't understand how they could possibly build all this. Well, then we found out it wasn't Henry Mayo, it was G&L. It was a G&L Realty, a Beverly Hills medical realty company that was building this. So we walked out, talked about it for a little bit, and went in and tried to ask as many questions as we could when it came to the questions and answers. And I had many questions at that time regarding the hospital. They couldn't be answered because they were building medical office buildings. And I was concerned. One woman stood up here and talked about her daughter that was recovering from cancer. So I've always been concerned. My main concern has been a pediatrics ward. We've never had a pediatrics ward. We never will. And I was told that night. I was told that night that we would have paid for parking. Simple as that, had to be paid for parking. That was the only way they were going to pay for the construction of those parking buildings. So I walked out of that very disillusioned because I was not hearing anything about a hospital. I still have not heard anything about a hospital. I've looked at the development agreement, I've read it over, and everything regarding the hospital is after those medical office buildings are built. And that concerns me because what's going to happen when it's all built? Do you think that they're going to get approval to keep building on the hospital when there's no room there? And if you've been to that area and you've walked around and you see the lack of room, you've got to understand that this is not a hospital they're talking about. And that concerns me because when it's all said and done, there won't be any space to build a hospital.
Thank you. Martha Willman, followed by Tony Newhall, followed by Rina Newhall. Martha?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Martha Willman, and I live in Valencia. I am most concerned with the assumption that heliports are an essential part of this master plan. In fact, the EIR states that nighttime helicopter noise at Henry Mayo exceeded the city's threshold for a residential neighborhood more than 4 years ago. That would require that a regional medical center with helicopter traffic as proposed here be situated in an industrial area away from homes. The latest staff comments admit that once heliports are approved in this plan, the city will have no say over operations and flight paths. In fact, state law prohibits the city from regulating flights based on noise levels. Therefore, lumping heliports into this master plan sacrifices an entire community of thousands of homes. A ground-level heliport made sense when it originally was authorized more than 35 years ago, when emergency air transport was compatible with a community hospital in a then lightly populated region. But 2 rooftop heliports in the midst of a sea of houses today is a whole different story. The County Emergency Medical Services Agency requires that residents within the Santa Clarita Valley be transported to the hospital by ground ambulance. In contrast, emergency air transport is used almost exclusively for patients originating from outlying areas. Therefore, air transport is not a benefit to the city, but rather a noise burden on its residents. The hospital chose to shut down its heliport more than 3 years ago. Since then, patients have been flown to nearby Providence Holy Cross, brief minutes away in flight time, or to other hospitals. Roger Seaver says a heliport is required for the hospital to retain its designation as a trauma center, but only a dozen others still hold that designation throughout the county. 11 others have dropped out, most often citing excessive costs. Still, more than 70 hospitals countywide provide emergency services. including 2 in the Antelope Valley, where there no longer is a designated trauma center. The vast majority of the county's hospitals, more than 50, operate without a heliport. So can Henry Mayo, especially since it violates the city's noise ordinance. The city council needs to get its priorities straight. Henry Mayo needs beds. It needs operating rooms. It needs centers of excellence. But the Santa Clarita Valley needs a true regional medical center that can serve the entire population, and it needs to be here in a location suitable for heliports. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Newhall.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, City staff, my name is Tony Newhall, and I'm a resident of Valencia, have been a resident of this community for more than 40 years. My family has been here a lot longer than that. I witnessed the conception of Henry Mayo Newhall Memorial Hospital 39 years ago, and I've always been proud of it, and for a while I was a part of it on the foundation board. But I've spent the last 2 years fretting about this campus expansion. I am dismayed by how little the plan has actually changed after 2 years of controversy and modification. The original concept of the master plan still remains. The developers are trying to cram too much on too small a plot of land in the heart of a residential community. The emphasis has been on constructing profit-making office buildings and parking structures, with the hospital inpatient tower in there somewhere. That said that there will be detrimental effects to the local community like overparking, crowded traffic, noise, and pollution. This controversy is taking a toll on this community. You've seen the newspaper ads, the page 1 stories, the editorials, the letters to the editor, extolling the points pro and con. This has even resulted in campaign contributions improperly made to city council members. And of course, we have witnessed the high-paid lobbyists swaggering around City Hall here on the payroll of the hospital or GNL. Why would a hospital need lobbyists? It's because this is not about a hospital. It's a real estate deal. The issue is fracturing our community. It's diverting our time and energy and money, resources that we should be directing toward bettering community health care. If you, the city council members, make a decision tonight, either way, it will not bring an end to all this. Our hospital, will, win or lose, will find its public relations affected. But if a compromise can be hammered out, I think the master plan will gain support. I implore the city council to postpone from making a final decision tonight. Delay it just to the next meeting, this December meeting after Thanksgiving, to allow time for the parties, including the attorneys, to sit down and work out a compromise that will be acceptable to all. As Dr. Terrazino said earlier tonight, keep us united. And I would like to add, regarding our discussions a few minutes ago when I was up here, regarding the memo that was signed at last night's meeting, I have learned that Smart Growth's attorney has advised the city council members, and I think the city attorney Montez mentioned, that it would be unethical to address this issue with us. And yet, some of you did so publicly tonight. We would ask that you honor this request of our attorneys and from the city attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Rina Newhall, followed by Cam Notmeyer, followed by Tim Ben-Boydston.
Mayor Keller, City Council, my name is Rina Newhall. I'm the better half. No. Okay. You know, I listened to some of the doctors, and I've heard some of this staff, and I've listened to the nurses, and I've listened to the testimonies. And I took it upon myself today and yesterday to call some of the doctors I knew personally. And I spoke with some of the doctors, doctor number one. I am not at liberty to give you their names. When I asked Doctor Number One why he did not choose to speak to the city council meeting tonight, and he said he would risk retaliation, be ostracized, and he couldn't show his face at the hospital. Doctor Number Two, I talked to him right after I talked to Doctor Number One, but I didn't tell Doctor Number One who I talked to. Doctor Number Two confided to me that he would be willing to speak if he didn't care about his children having a next meal. I love where I live. This is a quote. I love where I live. My kids like the schools. I value my job, and these are tough times. I can't afford to make waves. Doctor number 3, who I costumed this Halloween, made an interesting suggestion. He said if the council really wanted to know what the majority of the rank and file doctors truly thought, they should poll them by secret ballot. Conduct an independent survey with an impartial auditor. As far as I'm concerned, we've been railroaded, he says. It's all for profit bull, ... Dr. 4, he felt sorry for the doctors that were controlled by the hospital. And this is a quote, the majority of the doctors who run the emergency room, and I think we heard from Dr. Henry tonight, the radiology department, I think we heard from Dr. Goodman. I didn't know these names until they came up and spoke. And the 2 doctors that we heard in pathology, and he says, I think there may be a few others, he says a few other departments, may not be in total agreement with the master plan. They all want operating rooms, they all want good hospital facilities, but their hands are tied because he says they're on the hospital's payroll or they're getting perks. Number 4 also thought, as an afterthought, that maybe the hospital's books should be open to the public since it's a public entity. And I want to just add one more thing. I got this exclusive investment offering today, Cross Valley Medical Plaza. It says CB Richard Ellis is pleased to announce an excellent investment opportunity to purchase 2 institutional quality medical office buildings totaling 120,000 square feet. And I think Craig Peters mentioned that. So that's what I'm closing with. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Rina. Cam Noltmeyer. Time. Begin speaking, if you will, please.
Cam Noltemeyer, speaking for the Santa Clarita Organization for Planning and the Environment. You have already received our comments. You should have that. I want you to look at what is before you right now. You have a master plan that's requesting heights over 35 feet, 2 helipads, and the export movement of over 100 cubic yards of soil. What you have before you is an actual document from the Henry Mayo Hospital. You will see that there are A, B, C, and D, 4 one-story medical office buildings. There are medical office building E, which is actually 2 office buildings, all approved by the county. Office building F was approved by the city with a minor use permit. You also will see on that map 2 additional medical complexes. Now, this is presented by the hospital as hospital campus, but those 2 huge medical office buildings, one which they even state in your own comments by your city staff, has 4 operating rooms utilized by the hospital, are not included in the master plan. That is the Ambulatory Care Center and the Valencia Medical Building. That brings us to 3 additional medical office buildings, which you want to add for G&L Realty in this master plan. That is 12 office buildings. 12. Now, if anyone thinks this is the hospital master plan and not a G&L office building plan, all I say is look at what you have in front of you. We have concerns with the fact that you're dropping the CUP requirement. Now, if you look at F, that was approved by the city with a minor use permit. I have that for you here, and I'll give it to you after I'm finished speaking. This minor use permit was actually attested to by Ken Pulskamp as Secretary of the Planning Commission. He is now on the hospital board as their government rep, I believe. Actually, you'll see his name in that document. And we also have very concerns. There is no benefit to the community with your development agreement. Your master plan doesn't meet the criteria of your own city documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Cam. Tim Ben Boydston, followed by Linda Peterson, followed by Bruce Hunt.
Mayor and members of the City Council, I am former council member Tim Ben Boydston. I live in the great city of Santa Clarita, and I am for hospital expansion with enough parking. As you all know, I have spent many hours on this project with a special interest in parking needs. I have done an extensive parking study over the last several months, which I finished just this morning. I originally asked the council for permission to use 30 minutes to present it. It doesn't run quite that long. But I also asked if I could present a PowerPoint presentation, and Planning Director Paul Brotzman checked with the city attorney, and he said that would be okay, but that I personally would only have 3 minutes. So I gathered together 7 other citizens to do a little less than 3 minutes each. And I brought my laptop to plug it in over here to your computer system, and to run the slideshow that we would go with our presentation. And I was told a half an hour before this meeting by the Public Information Officer, Gail Ortiz, that I could not plug into this city system to show the slides because I'm not able to use those screens because they belong to you guys, and that I was not aware of that I couldn't plug in and use those screens there. So I would like the council to please allow the slides to be run, because if I don't run the slides with this presentation, it's not going to make very much sense. It's very complicated, and you will not know why there is a parking shortage, and there will be a parking shortage if you accept the plan as is. So the mayor, good enough, told me that he would have to ask you all if I can run the slides so that you can follow it with a slide presentation. So what say you?
Council?
How did Henry Mayo and Mr. Ghani plug in?
Well, you have your applicant, and you also have an organized group that is afforded 30 minutes, so they would have the privilege.
In fairness to staff, Mr. Boydston was aware of this. He was given, he gave it in time. I know you finished at the last minute. The issue was, according to the email we received to you, if you'd given the staff your presentation and they had the ability to load it prior to the meeting, they were going to have the ability to play it. And you didn't give it to them. I mean, that's the impression I got. Is that true, City Manager? I mean,
that's correct, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We had corresponded by email with Mr. Boydston on October 6th and said if he wanted to load it in the system, we'd like a copy of the presentation the week prior so it could be loaded into the system and available for the meeting.
And the second part of that email indicates that if I was using my own equipment, that I could just bring it in the same day, and that was what I did. Because I did not, when you said that to use your own equipment, you'd have to load it a week ahead of time, I was under the impression that I would have to use your computer or something like that, and I have my laptop, and it's right there, and it's just on a little stick like Mr. Ghani brought in, and it only takes a second to throw up on the screen, and I don't see what the problem is.
Any other comments on behalf of the council?
I think it was using the projector was the issue. It was our equipment.
Well, if he has his thing all set up and he has 7 people, each taking less than 3 minutes, what does it hurt to have him plug it in? I don't get the problem.
Is it operational?
It's up to the council.
No, does it have the ability to hit a button and activate this at this time?
How long would it take to set it up?
That I don't know. I'd have to check with Evan if you'd like.
Can you ask a couple of other people to speak until you find out?
Very well.
Thank you.
Stand by, Tim Ben. Did Lynn Plavix get back into the room?
Thank you. Oops. Well, I don't know how to do that. I didn't, it just fell off. Lynn Plavix, Santa Clarita Organization for Planning and the Environment. It's a little discouraging waiting this long to speak tonight, knowing full well that you intend to vote for this project, which was obvious during the session that you had with Mr. Ghani. However, I'm going to move forward and say my piece anyway. It's discouraging to say these things knowing that they will not be heard or addressed, but anyway. The CEQA process gives the city an important right to provide mitigations to the community for large projects. I think you're all aware of that. And so mitigation measures are really important. They're particularly important for air quality and global warming issues, which of course we have some of the worst air quality in the nation in this valley. We have a lot of children with asthma, a lot of lung problems, and it's something that we really need to look closely at. So your statement of overriding considerations, interestingly enough, draws on many of the illusionary commitments found in the development agreement. Therefore, it's probably not legal. But the other thing that I was really discouraged to see was that along an attachment of a letter or so ago, we attached a whole bunch of mitigation measures that would have lessened global warming issues and reduced air pollution. And 3 of those got incorporated into your statement, into your required mitigations for air pollution. 3 of them. I mean, we had 3 pages of them. They were a list prepared by the Office of the Attorney General to provide mitigation for global warming issues. And we really think that a lot more of them could have been required. It would have helped the community. It would have helped the city. This is a huge project. It's going to create all these bad impacts. You know, the city could at least require some reduction of them. But in the statement of overriding considerations, you provide issues that it doesn't matter if we're going to have worse air pollution because blah, blah, blah is going to be more of a benefit to the community. Well, many of the things listed, including items 2, 3, 7, 8, and 9, are all contingent on the development agreement being the hospital things actually coming into being. And as it was very clear, that development agreement doesn't really require those things. So I believe you have a problem with CEQA, and I think it's important that you look at it. And also, I wish you would put on some more mitigation measures for air quality and global warming. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Ingrid Boydston. Diane Troutman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Diane Troutman. I'm speaking as a private citizen this evening, but I want to start by dispelling the notion that the people who have raised issues about the project are anti-hospital NIMBYs who don't understand planning. You know me, and you know that I do understand planning. Good planning is not a side issue. It is critical to the long-term viability of a community. I share the concerns raised by Smart Growth SEV, and I support the requests as reasonable and prudent. They have presented factual information. I know the facts. Through 4 years of hearings, every speaker, but 1 or 2, has supported creation of an inpatient building in combination with necessary medical office buildings with specialty services. We all want a successful hospital, and it has to move forward in a responsible way. It's not or. That requires absolute commitments from the applicant. The original development agreement was unanimously rejected in large part because it did not provide a legally binding commitment to an inpatient building. The latest version still does not guarantee that inpatient building. It implies, it suggests, but it does not guarantee. Likewise, the Centers of Excellence promised to house all of those important services are not guaranteed. According to the development agreement, those services can be delayed until the inpatient building is built. Approval of this project without the recommended revisions and guarantees will needlessly sacrifice the surrounding neighborhood, which will affect negatively the community in long term. You and I know that developers ask for the moon and the stars. They tell us their proposals represent their bottom lines, as this applicant has done through several revisions. Your constituents count on you to hold all developers to a high standard to maintain community balance. I have been treated for cancer at our hospital, so I have emotional reasons to support expansion, but I want good planning to prevail. Please instruct your attorney to meet with the applicant and Smart Growth and their attorney to work out appropriate wording for the development agreement and additional concessions. The right agreement will pull this community together in support of the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Are we ready to go forward with Tim Ben Boyston group? Does anybody know?
Does the council want us to load it on there?
I thought that was the direction.
Yeah, that's what we.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Was the direction?
It'll take just a couple of minutes.
Okay. Lisa Robertiel, excuse me, followed by Richard North, followed by Bruce McFarland. Lisa?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Lisa Robertello, and I live in Valencia. Many residents have worked long and hard to bring out pertinent facts regarding the hospital project. Unfortunately, on more than one occasion, this one included, staff has thwarted this effort to bring forth the facts. In the summer of 2007, the public and Councilman Tim Ben Boyston revealed terrible flaws in the third version of the environmental report. It was apparent that massive parking shortfalls were deliberately buried. Meanwhile, the development agreement still did not commit to substantial public benefit, specifically actual hospital expansion. Staff and our city attorney had taken it upon themselves and without council direction to create this third amended agreement, crafting a new document that contained the same failures rejected unanimously by our planning commission. Why? Despite their poor performance, when staff realized that a new EIR would be required, they urged council to shorten the public comment period for the new document to only 30 days. The public requested 45 days, stating that such complex and controversial cases often receive twice that amount of time. It was also argued that the city could not shorten the review period without state approval. On August 28, 2007, City Attorney Carl Newton had the firm's CEQA expert, Geraldine Skapik, address the City Council to refute allegations from the public that the city did not have this right. Ms. Skapik made the following statement, quote, "On August 16th, we submitted a request to OPR for a shortened review period. We received comments from OPR, from the State Clearinghouse, stating that we needed to receive confirmation from all responsible agencies. We have received confirmation from all responsible agencies on this project, granting approval of a shortened time period." This is a direct quote. When Public Records Act requests were made to both the city and the state for these documents, we were shocked to learn that this dialogue between the two agencies, in fact, never occurred. The city finally admitted on October 23, 2008, after 2 requests, that the city did not receive a response from the Office of Planning and Research. More damning is that the OPR showed that no request was ever even made. Ms. Skapik's statement appears to have been entirely fabricated. At the behest of Mayor Bob Keller, thankfully, this council rejected staff's request that day. However, it must be noted on record that our city staff has repeatedly demonstrated it cannot be trusted in addressing key concerns of our general public. Without question, there are many good people working for the city, and we do indeed have much to be grateful for. But it is time for this council to ask why our city staff and attorney continue to mislead the public and the council. I urge the council to deal with this lack of ethics at City Hall, and I urge council to deny this plan until its inherent flaws are satisfactorily addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Richard North. Bruce McFarland. Bruce, you'll be followed by Kathy Balon.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I have some things here about the EIR and some defects in it, but it seems, from what I'm told, and I haven't been around for a lot of what we've been talking about, the last couple of meetings, that your minds are made up and that 3 of you were going to vote for this tonight and 2 of you are going to vote against, and nothing we say makes any difference. But something interesting happened when I got here, and I heard people talking, and there was a new development. I recall Mr. Seaver talking about the size of the tower, medical tower, and that it couldn't be reduced. And tonight, he said that he was willing to reduce it. He was willing to sign a document saying that he would be willing to reduce it. And he said at a previous occasion that he couldn't guarantee that he could build a hospital between MOB2 and MOB3, but tonight he was willing to do that. And the other one was about the centers of excellence that everybody seems to want. So I think everybody is ready to take their position tonight. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I appreciate all the people that are coming out and saying all the points that they think are wrong with this whole deal and development agreement and all of that. But we have those 2 points, 3 points that he's already said he was willing to concede on. If you don't allow that agreement to go forward and see if it can be worked out, you're basically disrespecting all the people who have worked, and I'm not one of them that has worked that hard, but a lot of people have worked for many months and years to try and get something. He's already said he would do it. He said it would be a concession. I wouldn't like to do it, but I'm willing to do it. Why not let him do it? You are the 5 arbiters of what that property will yield, and he's already said he's willing to do it, so let him do it. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Kathy Balon.
Good evening, Mayor Keller and council members. I'm a resident of Village Homes North, adjacent to the Henry Mayo Hospital. And my subject that I'd like to address tonight is the traffic not mitigated. The EIR and development agreement are both defective. CEQA requires that all project effects on the environment be mitigated if the mitigations are feasible and reasonable. In the case of this project, traffic mitigations identified in its early stages as reasonable and necessary have vanished or been taken away from the project. As an example, this no hospital project was required to contribute to reduce the congestion at the intersection of Bean Parkway and Valencia Boulevard. In the middle of the project's ongoing review, this mitigation was arbitrarily shifted away from this project and assigned to the Westfield Company. This is certainly improper and should be corrected this evening. Another example is that no funds for the relief of traffic congestion off-site of the project are required. This is especially perplexing since this project is requesting a developmental agreement. Development agreements are only granted after all effects of the project have been mitigated, including the required contributions to regional needs created by the project. Perhaps you could justify doing this for a nonprofit entity as Henry Mayo Hospital. Why would you want to extend this kind of gift to a for-profit developer, G&L Realty? You've never done this before for any other for-profit developer. Don't believe me regarding what I just told you. This evening, before you take any further action on this case, ask your staff in public to give you any examples where traffic mitigation contributions and fees have been given back to the developer or waived altogether as they are in this case. If you do, you will find out that this case sets a new ultra-low standard which should not be allowed. The city of Santa Clarita was formed in part to begin a new era of good government in Santa Clarita. Please don't spoil the dream of cityhood. Publicly obtain the answers to these questions tonight. When you do, you will see your only option is either to fix it or deny it. 17 months from now, 3 of you intend to stand before the voters of Santa Clarita. You will no doubt state that you should be returned to office. Part of your presentation may well be based on the assertion that your vision for Santa Clarita is unfinished. All this brings us to a challenge that confronts you this evening. 17 months from now, at the time of the next city council election, the vote you take this evening will have significant effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Boydston, will you come forward, and each of the speakers will be given 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, for allowing the slides to run. It will help you understand better what is being said. While on the Council, I became extremely concerned that the G&L development proposal was not providing enough parking. Since I have left the Council, I continued my work on this parking shortage issue, and I put the call out for help from my fellow citizens, and so they are here to help me by reading the words that I have written. Everyone knows the frustration of being in a parking lot where there's not enough parking. You circle endlessly, polluting the air as your frustration level rises. And now imagine what it's like to have a medical emergency, an important doctor's appointment, or a need to visit a family member at the hospital campus and you can't find a parking space. Countless people have shared their frustrations with me, and most of our community is aware that there's a huge parking problem now at the G&L Medical Office Building and Hospital Campus. The only question is, under the new development plan, will the parking shortage be fixed? I spent hundreds of hours researching this question while on the Council and since departing, and my conclusions are these. 1, the parking study paid for by the developer is so flawed that it cannot be relied upon. 2, if we use outside parking expert studies, there's an average shortage of 885 spaces. And 3, there will be a parking deficit in excess of 500 spaces as per City Code of Santa Clarita of July 2008. First, we must ask ourselves why there's a need for a parking study when the city already has a parking code. Wouldn't it be easier just to follow the existing code as it has already been interpreted? Perhaps it's the $30,000 average cost that each parking space on this project will cost to build because it's stacked parking and parking underground. A deficit of 500 spaces would cost $15 million to fix. If a developer spent $90,000 on a parking study and it convinces the council to require only 4 less spaces, the developer is way ahead already. Now, this parking shortage is about money. And please ask the questions that I'm no longer able to ask from the dais. And ask questions of the parking consultants and Mr. Roger Seaver and our planning staff. And I'm going to pass those out, and then the next speaker can come up. Thank you.
Next speaker is Linda Peterson, followed by Bruce Hunt. Linda?
My name is Linda Peterson. I live in Valencia, and I am continuing Tim Ben's narrative. The most important thing that a good parking study can do is to determine how many spaces will be needed when the project is built out. To do this, the study must first determine what the existing demand is. This will create a baseline. Using the baseline, future demand can be accurately calculated. The Lynn Scott parking study paid for by the developer states on page 26 that at 11 a.m. on the Wednesday of their study, a peak parking demand was observed and 1,051 spaces were full, leaving 63 spaces empty, which they termed 94% occupancy with a 6% vacancy of parking spaces. So if there's a 6% vacancy of parking at that time, you should be able to have a parking space, right? Well, here is a list of all the available spaces at 11 a.m. on that Wednesday, which made up that 6% vacancy. 1 green curb space, 7 unmarked illegal curb spaces, 26 handicap spaces, 3 spaces reserved for engineers, 3 spaces on the emergency red curb, 3 spaces for law enforcement, 12 spaces reserved for doctors, 2 patient loading spaces, 15 drop-off spaces, and 8 employee carpool spaces. None of these supposedly vacant spaces are available for the regular parker to use. There are no vacant spaces. In fact, there are 20 cars double parked in the drive aisles by the valets. There are cars circling looking for spaces and polluting the air. And since there are no spaces available for parking, there is no way of knowing how many people have left the campus to park in the nearby neighborhoods or have given up visiting the campus completely. Without the knowledge of the true demand for our existing parking needs, you cannot establish an accurate baseline, and therefore all the assumptions for future demand which rely on this baseline are flawed. It is also necessary to establish a baseline to identify how many parking spaces exist and how many are occupied by cars. Prior to the Lynn Scott study, the city counted the spaces and said there were 972 existing spaces. But Lynn Scott needed to show more spaces than there are, so they created 146 on-street parking spaces that were never counted before. Without curb spaces, there would be a huge deficit of parking. Curb spaces, as noted on page 21 of the Lynn Scott parking study, are not marked. Santa Clarita City Code for parking says, quote, each space shall be marked, unquote. Spaces which are not marked are not spaces and are not able to be counted as parking spaces. That is according to the city code. The entire study is defective because it counts spaces as empty or full that it cannot count because they are not marked. Since these spaces are not marked, how did the people counting the cars for the Lynn Scott study know when there was an empty space? How did they even know where the empty space was when it wasn't marked? This is another fatal flaw in the study.
Thank you, Linda. Bruce Hunt, followed by Greta Dunlap.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Hunt. I live in Valencia, and I'll continue with Mr. Boydston's narrative. So is there an outside independent source that can tell us accurately what the parking demands will be for our hospital space when it's finished? Let us look to outside experts who are in no way involved in our process and who are not being paid by the developer to render an opinion. We will use the same experts that Lynn Scott used, but we will show you all of their experts' data and not just selective pieces. Page 44 of Lynn Scott's study uses the third edition of Parking Generation by the Institute of Traffic Engineers Journal as a primary source for their study and uses this source to say that the medical office building parking is sufficient. The transportation engineer study states that 85 percentile requirement for 1,000 square foot of medical office building is 4.3 spaces. So the Lynn Scott study relies upon and quotes from the transportation engineer study for the medical office buildings because the recommendations for parking by the transportation engineer satisfies the parking requirements of the city code, and the developer has finally agreed to build enough parking spaces for the medical office buildings. However, the Lynn Scott study does not use this same expert source when it comes to hospital parking because it does not say what they want to hear. In fact, they even try to discredit it. According to the Lynn Scott study, the transportation engineer's requirements for a suburban hospital is not valid because the average size of the study for a suburban hospital was 440 beds. Henry Mayo Hospital is only half the average size at approximately 220 beds. What the Lynn Scott study fails to do is add the beds that will be put in during the expansion. According to the master plan, the total number of beds at completion will be 368. This puts the proposed project in the center of the parking demand chart, with about half of the examples falling above and half falling below. Henry Mayo is the perfect candidate to apply this study to. So why didn't Lynn Scott use the transportation engineer study? And why did they try to discredit it by purposefully ignoring all of the beds that were being added? Here's why. Because if we use the average peak parking demand called for in the parking demand for suburban hospitals, it would require 4.72 vehicle spaces per hospital bed. The result is a requirement of 1,737 spaces. Subtract the 784 spaces now called for in the plan, and you will see that the deficit is 953 parking spaces. No wonder the Lynn Scott study chose to ignore the transportation engineers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Greta Dunlap, followed by Mike Nome.
Hi, Mayor Keller and City Council members. I'm Greta Dunlap, a resident of Santa Clarita, and I'll continue the narrative. Also, the transportation engineers didn't just evaluate parking needs by using total number of beds. They did a second type of study using the total number of employees that work at the hospitals. Linscott also ignored this study. So let us look at the second study that uses the number of employees as criteria. According to the American Hospital Association's December 2007 survey, Henry Mayo Newhall Memorial has 1,520 full-time and part-time employees. According to the hospital representatives, the increase of 70% in beds will only result in a 27% increase in employees. While this seems very low, we will use it to estimate the number of employees at build-out, which will be 1,930. By using transportation engineers' analysis, weekday suburban, peak period parking demand, the average peak period parking demand is 0.83 vehicles per employee. The definition of an employee includes all full-time and part-time employees. At 0.83 vehicles per employee, 1,601 parking spaces would be required to meet the demand. By subtracting the 784 proposed spaces, that leaves a deficit of 817 parking spaces. It is extremely telling that when we plug the numbers into two different studies by the transportation engineers, we have analyzed the parking needs for suburban hospitals using two entirely different criteria. We get very similar results with peak averages showing a shortage of 953 and 817. So the outside experts show huge parking deficits for this project for the hospital spaces. Can we confirm these expert studies by looking at factors in our own project proposal, which would explain why these deficits exist? The first factor is beds in the emergency room areas. There are a total of 49 beds, which include 18 in the new ER, 15 in the existing inpatient emergency department, and 16 in the emergency department urgent care. Santa Clarita's city code requires 2 parking spaces per bed, which would require 98 parking spaces. The developer will supply only 18 spaces. Why? On August 24, 2008, the City Council approved the City Planning Department's request to redefine a licensed bed. The developer claims they do not have to and have never needed to supply 2 parking spaces per ER bed. Why then was there a need to redefine the code in the middle of this planning process?
Thank you, Mike Nome, followed by Pam Ross, followed by Tony Natoli.
Mike Nome, Santa Clarita. The second component of the code requires that in addition to the 2 spaces per licensed bed, there must be an additional one space per 400 square feet of outpatient clinics, labs, pharmacies, and similar uses established in conjunction with the hospital. This space is sometimes referred to by the city and the developer as diagnostic and treatment space, or D&T space. Space for these functions has been built into the hospital and is now filled with many different uses which add to the parking deficit. How? When the hospital was first built, it was rather small. However, it had several hospital space expansions. For example, in 1984, a 28,500 square foot expansion, which included administrative and educational classroom space, was finished. But because it was within the hospital envelope, the developer now claims that no additional parking spaces are required for its current use. The hospital is now approximately 210,000 square feet and continues to grow, but no new parking spaces have been required for many of the expansions. According to the developer, the D&T space in the existing hospital is 79,165 square feet. The code required parking for this D&T space is 1 space per 400 square feet. Therefore, the D&T space requires at least 198 spaces in addition to the 2 spaces per bed to satisfy the city code. How many spaces is the developer going to supply? Only 26 spaces. This leaves a 172 space deficit according to the city code for the existing hospital D&T space. How can the developer do this? By an egregious, incorrect interpretation of the city code. The developer pretends that the outpatient and outpatient clinic applies to all labs, pharmacies, and similar uses established in conjunction with the hospital. In other words, they contend that if they label functions in the hospital as inpatient, they don't have to provide parking for it. The code doesn't say this. If the code were to read this way, it would read outpatient clinics, labs, pharmacies, and similar patient uses, which it does not. The uses that are listed are for both inpatient and outpatient, with the catch-all phrase, similar uses established in conjunction with the hospital. The reason for the additional parking spaces for the D&T functions in the hospital is very clear. All these areas need extra parking to accommodate the employees, patients, visitors, vendors, students, and other people who use them.
Thank you, sir.